Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2, and today I want to make a quick video for you sorks out there that want a fantastic starter build that does not really require any gear at all. You could slap this on the second that you get into World Tier 4, and it will very easily carry you all the way through the leveling process and even into the end game. This is going to be one of one of Sorcerer's best builds overall this season, but the best part about it is that you can just put it on real quickly, and you can use this build to not only do very high tiers of the pit, but also kill a lot of the tormented bosses so that you can then get the gear, get the legendaries, the uniques, etc. in order to swap to a different build. Like I said, this build does not require any gear at all. You can just put it on very easily and already start annihilating. Season 5 has only been out for 24 hours and I've already leveled up a Sorc and a Rogue, and as you can see I'm doing very high tiers of the pit with no issue at all, and I could probably do up to 110 with my current gear, and my gear is extremely not min-max. Like, I've spent very little time on this character, and as you can see the damage is already insane. I've gotten up to like a 17 million blizzard tick, and that could easily be double that once this is actually min-max. But best part about this is that the second you get to World Tier 4, you can just put this build together. So I'm not going to go super in-depth, super min-maxy with everything. I will be updating the build link, which will be in the description, but I'm just going to be showing you guys how you can swap to this real quickly and just start blasting right out of the gate. One thing I want to mention is that the second that I'm done making this video, I'm actually going to swap to a completely different Sorcerer build, but I'm not sure which one yet. It's going to be based on what you guys vote. I posted a poll, so feel free to reply to the poll, or just let me know down in the comments which Sorcerer build you would like to see first, and that is the build that I'm going to work on literally the second that I am done recording this video. Right now, Chain Lightning is winning that poll, but feel free to let me know down below if you have a different preference. One of the main reasons for setting this build up is that the gear required for other builds is going to take some time to get, and they just straight up require more gear in order to get going and get the ball rolling, such as Chain Lightning, whereas Blizzard, the only thing that you need is to be in World Tier 4, have like a decent two-handed weapon, and then you just put the glacial aspect on it. If you haven't played Blizzard before, Blizzard itself doesn't actually do any damage. It is all this glacial aspect. So all you need is put this on a two-handed weapon, and then you temper ice spike damage on your weapons, your rings, etc. And then you solve your mana issues, which is really easy to do, and boom, your build is already blasting. You don't need any uniques at all. However, uniques will definitely make the build a lot better. And down in the description, I'll have a build link for a starter version of the build, as well as a unique version, and then an uber unique version. I'll have to min-max those a little bit more, but the starter version of the build really is just put glacial aspect on a two-hander, and then solve your mana. Because mana is pretty much the only problem you'll ever encounter with this build once you start to get it rolling, I'm going to go on a quick tangent about how you can solve that instantly and all your different options for solving your mana problems. There's a whole bunch of them. One of the great ways to help with your mana is getting resource cost reduction on gear. You can get this on your two-handed weapon, which is a great place to have it. It does not have much of a downside putting it there. And then also on your rings, you can temper. Obviously having unique rings is pretty good, but you can temper resource generation and resource cost reduction, and that will help a lot. Another great way to get mana is getting mana per second on either your helmet or your chest. This will just give you some passive mana generation all the time. You could also get the aspect, there's two different aspects that would help you significantly with mana. Aspect of Elemental Acuity will give you a massive amount of mana generation, up to 120% if you have this maxed, or you could go with the Prodigy aspect, which will simply just give you mana whenever you use a cooldown. Very early on, you should have this within your codex, so you could just slap that onto a ring, in addition to some resource generation, and you could also temper resource gen or cost reduction on your amulet, and that will help you as well. Tibalt's Will, if you happen to get it, is really nice. Anytime you press Teleport or Flame Shield, this is going to give you some additional mana. And another way that you can get mana, which is really nice, which I'm not even spec'd into currently, but you can go 3 points into Fiery Surge. This will just give you 45% mana generation, and we are using the Firebolt enchant with this build, so we are constantly killing enemies that are burning, so that's just a whole bunch of extra mana for us. Lastly, if you are still having problems, you can use an Elixir of Resourcefulness, which will just give you 20% resource cost reduction, which is pretty massive early on. Now that we have mana out of the way, let's get into how the build actually functions. So when it comes to our skills, we're using Firebolt just as the Firebolt enchant to apply burning. This is great for multiple reasons, mainly to get Devouring Blaze, to activate some of our glyphs, and you get a ridiculous amount of healing via Warmth here, which is very nice, but also if you need the mana via Fiery Surge, that is a way to apply that. So Firebolt enchant is real nice. Keep in mind that the Blizzard and Ice Spikes don't actually apply Firebolt enchant. It is only going to be applied via your other skills, either being Ice Blades or Lightning Spear. or if you're using the Frozen Orb enchant, which we'll talk about in a second. Other skills, you want to use Flame Shield all the time because it's an immunity and it's unstoppable. Ice Armor is real nice. It just is great for survivability, and it's going to give you some additional mana regen while it's active as well. Teleport, obviously, I'm never playing Sorc without Teleport on my bar. And then Lightning Spear is fantastic because it applies vulnerable, it is going to stun enemies, and there's also some synergies with dealing shock damage, so that is also nice. And then we have Ice Blades for vulnerable application, and I'm personally using the Ice Blades enchant so that we get more cooldown reduction for a lot of our spells, so we just have more uptime on everything. However, when you first swap into the build, and you'll see that I have it in the starter version, we are going to be using Frozen Orb as our enchant. The reason for Frozen Orb as the enchant is because Frozen Orb has this here where it has a very high chance of applying vulnerable, and it also is good for freezing elites. So as you get into the build and you have it set up early on, you want to be using the Frozen Orb enchant so that you can apply vulnerable. But the reason that you swap to Ice Blades later is because once you get enough cooldown reduction, you can always have an Ice Blades and a Lightning Spear out, so they will constantly be applying vulnerable for you, and that way you don't need the Frozen Orb to apply vulnerable. The reason that having Ice Blades enchant is slightly better than Frozen Orb is because you just get cooldown reduction for all of your skills, so you can have higher uptime on using your teleport for unstoppable, and you can have higher uptime on a lot of your barriers via protection, etc. I already talked about the Firebolt enchant. I'll quickly go over the skill tree, but it's pretty bare bones or pretty basic stuff here. Firebolt. Since I'm not going into Frozen Orb, I just had a ton of extra points. So I just went to Potent Warding, which is real nice. You get a whole bunch of maximum resistance there. Devastation, just 1 point, whatever. 1 point to Flame Shield because these other ones don't really do much. And then I just went to Teleport, got the DR. 1 point to Attunement to just have a chance to reset these. Glass Cannon, I have 3 points for my Amulet, but that's just more damage. And then we go into Ice Armor with Shimmering. Protection for the Barrier. And Mana Shield for damage reduction. And then we go into Ice Blades for the cooldown reduction there. And then Lightning Spear for the stun anytime that it crits, which is insanely good for mobbing. Conjuration Mastery is nice. We also get a bit of extra value having Ice Blades enchant, having more Ice Blades out, so we get a little bit of extra damage via Conjuration Mastery. And then we go into Blizzard and just have the additional duration. Again, Blizzard itself doesn't do any damage, so leveling it up doesn't do anything. You could, if you wanted more survivability, swap points out of Conjuration Mastery and put it into Icy Veil, so your barriers last a little bit longer. That is a bit helpful. And then we go into Devouring Blaze for just more crit damage. Permafrost, Icy Touch, Hoarfrost for damage. And then I have Fiery Surge, 1 point, Endless Pyre, 1 point, and then I just have 2 into Warmth for some healing. This gives you crazy healing, very good for survivability. And then I go into Electrocution, so I get enemies deal 18% less damage to me, and I'm constantly critting them with Lightning Spear, but also we are doing lightning damage with Veer's Mastery, mainly using this because it's going to give us 25% less damage taken, which is really good. And none of these other key passes really do anything for us because Blizzard isn't doing our damage, it's the Ice Spikes. So Avalanche doesn't help us at all. You could go for Shatter for a little bit better ad clear, but I don't think it helps that much. I like having Veer's Mastery just for the damage reduction, honestly. And then while charged, you will have the crit chance thing doing some lightning damage, which will proc Electrocution. When it comes to legendary aspects and uniques, again, you can just reference the starter guide, and you don't need uniques at all with this build, but some honorable mentions are going to be Blue Rose. This is extremely powerful. This got a massive buff. It has a ridiculous amount of crit chance on it, a lot of cold damage, huge amount of Ice Spike damage, and a chance for Ice Spikes to explode twice, and it has the additional effect where you just have a chance to form Ice Spikes, and it'll just do extra damage. So this is just an all-in-one amazing package and very good early on. And then Talrasha got buffed as well, so it goes up to 80% damage, and it gives you cooldown reduction, and it gives you some survivability via Potent Warding, and the non-physical damage there. And having the non-phys damage and the cold damage from Blue Rose by itself will completely cap out your Frigid Fate node for 60% increased damage just by having these two rings. So getting these early on is going to be extremely worthwhile for you. Otherwise, Esu's Heirloom is great. It's just a lot of crit chance, and you can get both of these by killing Varshan, which you could do literally at like level 60 if you wanted. Tibalt's Will is nice because you get the extra damage, and you get the extra mana there, and it has pretty good stats on it, but definitely not needed at all. And then obviously on the two-hander, you want to have Glacial Aspect because this is all of our damage. On your amulet, you want to go for Storm Swell because it is the highest multi you can get, just 45% increased damage. And then on your gloves, you want to have Frozen Tundra. People ask questions about this all the time. We don't care about the top part. We're only using it for the bottom part, which is our ice spikes have increased explosion radius. Without this, the explosion radius is very tiny, and then you're not able to do very consistent damage against large packs of monsters or against bosses, and that can be really rough. For our other aspects, we just want to have, I have Concussive Strikes for extra damage, but this could be aspect of Concentration, which is damage reduction whenever you use a Conjuration skill, being Ice Blades or Lightning Spear. That's just a ton of DR. Snow Veil, or Snow Guard rather, is insane, 30% DR all the time. And then if you had, a normal pair of pants rather than a unique pair, you could just add Concentration and keep Concussive Strikes. Concussive Strikes really helps with applying more crowd control to bosses, and it's just a little bit of extra damage. And then if you didn't have Esu's Heirlooms, you definitely want to get these because it gives you a ton of crit chance. I mean, you just get, like, anytime you dash, you just get 40% crit chance, which is insane. But if you don't get these, just get something like Ghost Walker and some movement speed boots. When it comes to the rolls that you actually want on your gear, you want to armor cap yourself. That is very important. If you don't have Concussive Strikes, you could get like Disobedience or Juggernaut early on and armor cap yourself. The armor cap is 9,310. My gear is a little bit scuffed because I don't have any gold at all, so I wasn't able to roll armor on one of my defensive pieces. But you want to have armor on one defensive piece and then 2 armor tempers, and that will get you to armor cap by itself around 9,300. But if you're unable to get that, then you need to use a armor legendary. Outside of getting armor, you want to have intelligence, max HP, and mana per second is very good. If you're having mana problems, mana per second, especially if you can get a greater affix and then you masterwork it, that will give you a whole bunch of extra mana, and that will scale off of your mana, your resource generation, and stuff like Fiery Surge or Aspect of Elemental Acuity, that will scale, so that's really good. Same story on the chest. Int is good for damage, max HP is good for survivability, mana per second is fantastic. If you wanted to get armor on one of these pieces, you would just swap the intelligence for armor. On gloves, you want exactly this roll. Int, attack speed, crit chance is nice. And then for the tempers, you want to go for like crowd control duration or lucky hit chance to apply some form of crowd control, which really helps with staggering bosses. And then you want to go for ice spike damage. Pants, if you don't have Tibalt's Will, try to get basically what you have on the chest. Int, max HP, mana per second, or armor. And then boots, if you don't have Esu's, try to get like, you can get mana per second, you can get movement speed, intelligence, that's probably your best bet. On your staff, you want to have intelligence, and then max HP is good for survivability, and then you could either go for resource cost reduction or for crit damage. Resource cost reduction is very good early on, it really helps out with your mana. With this, I don't have mana problems very much at all unless I'm fighting bosses, and this is with a super not min-max version of the build at all. You can see that I have lucky hit chance to apply shadow damage. This can either be shadow or poison. The reason for this is it gives us a 4th stack of Talrasha, so we get up to that 80% increased damage. So that's just 20% damage by having that. But if you don't have Talrasha, just put the Elemental Surge on it anyways, because there isn't another temper that is really going to help you. And you want to get Talrasha as soon as possible, so definitely do that. If you don't have Talrasha or Blue Rose, you can use Prodigy Aspect or Aspect of Elemental Acuity, and if you want to go for another damage aspect, you could go for Aspect of Shredding Blades, which is just damage against vulnerable, or you go for Conceited Aspect. But again, I would recommend trying to get these as soon as possible. Blue Rose you get from Duriel and Andariel, so it's a little harder to get, but Talrasha is just Varshan, which is really easy. On the amulet, there's a ton of stuff that you can get. As you can see, I have armor on here, which is not ideal. Ideally, you would have probably attack speed, and then you'd have some passives. So you see, I have Icy Touch and Glass Cannon, which is a lot of damage, but Glass Cannon will make you take more damage, right? Only 6% more by having 3 ranks, but still a survivability nerf. Ideally, you want to have like Devouring Blaze, and then Icy Touch would be good. Hoarfrost is also real nice, 18% increased damage to frozen enemies. I think you can get Permafrost as well, which does work for the ice spikes. So just a recap on that, attack speed is really good, intelligence percent is also pretty nice, and then any of those passives, Icy Touch, Glass Cannon, Devouring Blaze, you could even get crit chance on here, which is nice. And then for the tempers, again, ice spike damage and resource generation or resource cost reduction, they're fairly interchangeable. When it comes to the Paragon board, again, this will be posted in the description and the build link, but I go for winter, buffing some resistance to all elements. You should have a very easy time getting resistance capped because you have so much intelligence, and also Esu's gives you some resistance to all elements on it, and also you get some resistance to all elements within the Paragon board. as you can see, I have a couple points here that I could go here, 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 and then that would be 5% extra resistance, or almost 6% actually. So if you needed more resistance, you could easily do that, and you could also put some gems in for diamonds if you were to have a little bit more armor, but I had to go for skulls. Anyways, when it comes to glyphs, we go for Winter, which is just a massive damage increase. We go for Elementalist, which is damage and buffing our all-res here. And then we have Tactician for extra damage, and it also is buffing damage reduction against burning enemies and damage to burning. Stalagmite is real nice, mainly for 20% increased crit chance against enemies, or with our ice spikes. And my glyphs aren't even level 21, by the way. I could be doing significantly more damage. Control, real nice. Only works against bosses when they're staggered, but it's really good for ad clearing. You could swap that out to, I don't remember what it is, but probably like Exploit or something if you wanted to do more boss damage. But for just general clearing, 20% multi is real nice. And then I have Destruction, 12% increased multi, and some crit damage, and then also Flame Feeder for just a 10% multi. Before I do Dungeon, I real quickly want to talk about some other unique options that there are. So for the helmet, there's Harlequin Crest, which is straight up just very good, and you should definitely use that once you get it. Alternatively, there's Crown of Lucion, which if you get a max roll is a 75% damage increase, but in order to use Crown of Lucion, you probably need to pair it with Ring of Starless Skies. Otherwise, your resource cost is just going to be way too high to be able to actually play with it, and that's going to require a little bit more gear. I also have to do the math on which ring you'd want to lose, either being Talrasha or Blue Rose. You'd probably lose Talrasha for Starless Sky, but again, I have to do the math a little bit on that to figure that out. But those are your other options. For now, though, I would pretty much just stick with this version of it. Another thing is that getting cooldown reduction on Helmet and Amulet is also very nice, because we want our cooldown on Lightning Spear and Ice Blades to be as low as humanly possible. Alright, real quickly to show you guys some gameplay of a tier 91 pit, I think this is. This build is probably capable of like 110 plus right now, very easily like way higher than that once you have it actually min-maxed. Like Crown of Lucion gives you literally 75% more damage, like you would be hitting for insane numbers. But I just want to show you that you can go into a tier 91, again, and just absolutely annihilate everything. And the game hasn't even been out, it's been out for 24 hours and 40 minutes, and I have 2 level 100s, and not spent much time on this character really at all. So you can see that I just absolutely blast. One of the problems if you go to Ice Blades enchant early on is that your vulnerable application is not great, because you are relying on Lightning Spear and you are relying on Ice Blades. That's your only form of vulnerable. And if you don't have low enough cooldown reduction, you don't have Lightning Spear and an Ice Blades up all the time. But as you get more cooldown reduction, you'll be spawning more of them. Normally I use Aspect of Shredding Blades so that, god, DR mobs are kind of annoying, so that my Ice Blades last a little bit longer, but that doesn't seem to be giving me a damage increase right now. I need to test if that's bugged or not, but it's okay. Storm Swell is pretty nice, but as you can see, if mobs actually get frozen and they sit in the blizzards, they pretty much just instantly die. When it comes to playing with the build, I'd recommend just not spamming all your skills simultaneously. You want to kind of rotate them, especially Teleport and Flame Shield, because you want to permanently have access to the additional damage via being unstoppable or becoming unstoppable. And just don't spam all your cooldowns at the same time, because you want to always have a barrier for protection. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You kind of just run and place blizzards behind you, and enemies will kind of just walk into it and die. If you farm like the same tier over and over again, you'll get used to how many blizzards you need to put per group of enemies, because like I could sit here and wait until this guy dies, but that's a little bit redundant and kind of a waste of time. You could just easily put the blizzards behind you, and they will just die as you walk away, because it takes a second for the ice spikes to actually start doing damage. If you've played Blizzard before, you get the drill. You get used to it. It takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to playing with it, but it's really, really easy. Your survivability is pretty nice, and you could go way more into survivability. But yeah, early on, especially like starter version of the build, I would recommend keeping Frozen Orb enchant, because it is really good for consistency. That was not even a particularly clean run, but you saw like you just put a couple blizzards on enemies and they just die, and that is, like I said, a tier 91, hitting for up to like 17 mil against enemies that are affected by every crowd control. My mana situation is not perfect right now, so I run out of mana a little bit on bosses here, and just make sure to rotate your cooldowns, save your Flame Shield for whenever you're scared. And another thing is you want to be pressing spacebar on cooldown, because that is going to give you additional crit chance. And then as you can see, when the bosses are staggered, they take quite a bit of damage. I don't have the ideal tempers, like my armor tempers are not great right now, so I don't have a lot of form of crowd control. So my stagger is pretty slow, but usually you can kill bosses within like 1 or 2 staggers if you have all of your buffs active. It depends on the tier and it depends on how good your gear is. Oh, almost actually died there. Thank God for Flame Shield. But usually if you have like the build perfectly set up, you can apply stagger real quickly and then just absolutely nuke the bosses. But as you can see, that was a tier 91, and this build is super not min-max at all. I'll go over my stats real quick if you guys want to see. Crit chance could be a little bit higher, like I'm missing 30% crit chance here. And that is all of my stats. Again, things are barely masterworked. Game has barely been out, and this could be way better. So that is pretty much it for the video. I would highly recommend playing Blizzard early on, and then I'll let you guys know what to swap to once I've tried a lot of the other builds, and I will be making videos for the other builds as soon as literally today. So feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.